Welcome back, baseball fans, to another eliminating video. Of course, we're going to eliminate the two World Series combatants, beginning with the Oakland A's. And what you are looking at, ladies and gentlemen, is last year's Oakland stats. A season where they did not even win their division. The California Angels won the West. The A's did go to the playoffs as a wild card, and they were bounced out by the Red Sox in the playoff wild card round. And they were led by Mangual, hitting .304. J.L. Liu was traded in the offseason to Milwaukee, part of that George Scott, Marty Patton, Mike Hegan deal. Tennis had a magnificent year, 289, 1742 with that brilliant 70 card. Campaneris, 27 stolen bases. Looks pretty good. Then you start to see that Reggie hit 236 last year. And Bando 251 with only 5 home runs. You're also seeing that the runs they score was 250 and runs given up was 255. It adds up to a 28 and 26 record where the team just could not figure themselves out. And when we go to pitching, it looks even worse because we have the 71 Vita Blue card, incredibly going 7 and 9. Now he pitched well. He had a 2.88 ERA and a 1.26 WHIP in 10 complete games. But that's a lot of bad luck. Catfish Hunter was 8 and 5. Together, they're only at game over 500 with 17 complete games. The bullpen, Raleigh Fingers was the closer, but his ERA is unsightly at 4.68. And there was the help in the pen was terrible. Gerald Nyman, Danny Combs, and Bob Locker didn't do much. Mike Torres was the number 3 guy, who was pretty bad as well, and he was part of that big trade. They shipped him out in a deal, and they brought Ken Holtzman in, hoping that would get more like the traditional Dynasty-era A's, which had, of course, Blue and Hunter and Holtzman and Blue Moon Odom, for instance. It adds up to a 258 hitting team with a 4.22 ERA. But now let's look at this season, and of course, they went to a Game 7 against the Reds. Everything's better. 277 hitting is better. A 365 ERA is better. You still have Mangual leading the club in hitting at 345. Gene Tenace puts back-to-back MVP caliber years together. Mike Hegan was a wise choice to play first base with a 307 average. Joe Rosen card improved to a 72 card, and he hit 302 with it. His card is 305. Reggie's 293 card, it's 289, and the home runs are on target, and stolen bases are on target, as are the walks and on-base percentage. Donaldson and Joshua outperformed their extra player cards. Bando's average is not there, but his on-base is, and his power's there. Jim French spent a lot of the year leading off with his on-base percentage. Look at that, 380. With 28 walks and 135 at-bats for French, which is why he led off a lot of the time. That's the fourth highest on-base percentage on the team. Very Billy Ball, as you would imagine. And Campaneris was the only disappointing average, but he did have 21 stolen bases again. Had some critical defensive lapses in Game 6 of the World Series, which we went on about. Pitching-wise, so Blue and Hunter realized their card performances combined to go 24 and 6. Vita Blue was 24 and 8 and 71 in a full season. 17 complete games. ERAs and WHIP below the league average, of course. Magnificent. Raleigh Fingers only had 5 saves. Now part of that is because Blue and Hunter had so many complete games. Now part of that is because he blew so many saves. That 3.60 ERA is slightly misleading. One of his relief appearances against the Reds in the World Series, he threw 5 shutout innings in that miraculous Game 5 marathon 17-inning affair. You take those 5 shutout innings away, his ERA would be 10 earned runs in 20 innings. And then you have the rest of this awful bullpen. Ron Taylor, he also had 3 shutout innings that brought his ERA down from 4.5. Rick Austin's ERA was 9 at one point. And somehow he got 2 decisions in a World Series of his 3. He won the marathon game, and then he lost Game 6, back-to-back games. because he was the only bullpen in Game 6 because all the other relievers were used up. It is an incredible season. Look at the runs scored now, 308 versus giving up 230. They're plus 78. So this is right on track to be the great dynasty Oakland A's. So they're on course, and they were, my goodness, an inning away. They had the lead in the 9th inning of Game 7, and they just couldn't finish it. And that was sort of the story of the 72 World Series, where they did finish it. Could have gone either way. The traditional MLB 1972 World Series, and of course the World Series I just played with cards from 70, 71, 72, and 73. So, with that, let's take a look at the Oakland A stack of cards. It's going to be bittersweet. We're going to do some magnificent cards from 1970 having to be put away. And but that's all right. I mean, this is the one team, of all the teams in Strat-O-Matic, this is the one team that should be able to build very well, as they aren't even beginning the dynasty yet, folks, right? 70 and 71 account for 14 of the 20 cards. And they didn't go to World Series till 72. So next year, even, you could cut them some slack, because they're going to have 871 cards. So, yeah. But could you imagine winning a World Series before the dynasty begins? They almost did that. These are the 8 players in 1970. And it's not too bad. We know what's coming back, of course, but there's a bunch of guys you can get rid of as well. So it's a fair bit of 8 guys. And let's see how the dynasty team, who they're going to bring back. They're going to split it between 6 hitters and 6 pitchers. All right. All right, we have Reggie and Rudy in the outfield. Hegan, 3 big guns, and Green, of course, defensively. And then Mangual and Stan Swanson. So Stan Swanson, by the way, was just the 20th player. They had to get an outfielder to platoon at DH and outfield, and that's what. And they didn't have any. I guess they could have taken George Hendrick, but he was really awful in 71. Or 72, and they couldn't get him, so they got this guy. Now this guy could be part of a trade now. You only needed him, you only needed to add this guy because he played in the year of 1971, but now you realize you have no use for him anymore, so you can cut him, or you could simply package him in a deal. Hegan will be coming back with his brilliant 72 card, so you'll have 3 more cracks with this wonderful card. 2 more cracks. We like this Dick Green, the best of them. Look at the power. It's sneaky, but it's 12 home runs. This is Rudy's best car in the dynasty years of 72. Reggie's 73 MVP card. And Mangual in center field led the club in hitting 2 years in a row, mostly because he played a bulk of it against lefties here, where he just crushes. And didn't play that much. Played only sparingly over here, as they had a lefty platooner. It was Von Joshua this year who platooned. So it's a 286 card. Now let's start at the front here. And the great news, of course, is that they're going to run these pitchers back one more time. So Vida Blues, magnificent 71 card, who was out there in games 1, 4, and 7 of the World Series, pitched into the 9th inning of Game 7. When he gave up a game-tying homer to Lee May and was pulled. Vida Blue will go back one more time next year, the final crack at this card. And remember, 72 he gets a little injured, and he comes in, doesn't perform as well, and he's often used in the bullpen in the postseason, playoffs, and so forth. Catfish Hunter's best year, of course, we have this for 2 more years, is 1972. And Kenny Holtzman's 72 card, of course, as well. He needs to have a better year. He struggled as a number 3 starter. And we mentioned, even as a starter 8, he did not have a complete game this year. Bob Locker comes back, and this might have been one of the bigger stories, in that he wasn't used enough. He finished the season with a 47-cent earned run average and a 63-cent whip. 19 innings, give up just 10 hits and a run and 2 walks. And he should have been used more. Ron Taylor could be traded as well. They needed to add a pitcher from 1971. He was a Met, so you could cut him and find somebody better if it exists, or trade him. And Raleigh Fingers is your closer. We thought this was his best card in the Dynasty years, his 73 card, but didn't perform very well. So maybe it performs well next year. So with that, let's take a peek now at what do the Oakland A's do with those 8 1970 cards. Alright, let's take a peek now at the 8A players. Some are slam dunks, and of course some are just going to be cuts. We start with a slam dunk, and it's Sal Bando. So, we talked about how much we enjoyed his 69 and 70 cards. And 69, he was an all-star, 734 plate appearances, by the way, 885 OPS, MVP votes. In 71, he's second in the American League in MVP voting. This card would be available. We had it available last year. We didn't select it. We stuck with a 70 card because of that 407 on base with 118 walks. The walks drop down a little bit. His on base drops down a little bit. His power goes up a little bit. And that's probably the card they'll take. But they have their choice of 71, 2, 3, and 4. You don't want 72. Again, we mentioned a lot of the times the A's dynasty players aren't necessarily that great in the dynasty. Bando at 236 and 72 and 243 and 74. OPS under 800. 2 out of 3 World Series years. Got 3 MVP votes with that 74 card too. But the best year would be the 73 card. 32 doubles led the American League. Does that seem low? Just 32 doubles? Anyway, 295 bases in 73. So that card or the 71 card, and there'll be plenty of time for that discussion to happen. For Sal Bando, the first keeper of the Oakland A's. Next player, Bert Campaneris. And you'll see the anomaly of 70 where dude just cranked it. Crushed it out of the park. 1970. Campaneris had 22 home runs and 42 stolen bases with a 279 average, a 769 OPS. All that does is get you 24th on the list of MVP votes, by the way. In the 2020 era, here's a guy 22-42, and he can only make it that far up the MVP list. 71 to 74, batting average 74 is the only one. It's 40-50 points higher than the other years. Stolen bases go down. MVP votes are pretty consistent. All-star appearances as well. Ultimately, I think the defense has to be there. I'm not sure if he ever becomes a 1, but he should be a 2, you would think. And you really, after what happened defensively in Game 6, when they lost, and he made 3 huge mistakes late in that game, I think the best defensive performance of Campaneris is what they'll ultimately select. Whether it's 74, that would be a home run if it's 74, because that matches his offensive production. So, third base and shortstop positions are returning, of course, for the Oakland A's. Next up, John Donaldson. Was a 1970 player. Actually turned out that he would play a lot. He only comes back in 1974 for 15 at-bats, so we can assume that Mr. Donaldson's card has been retired. He had 89 plate appearances in 70, and he pretty much had that same amount in the season we just played. Sal Bando got injured in 2 of the World Series games, and Donaldson had to rush over and play third base, where he's normally a second baseman. So Donaldson will be retired. Next player, and a truly fun player to use for Oakland during this particular team and this particular timeline, was catcher Jim French. This guy had a great eye and could draw the walks. Was a Washington Senator his whole career. But his walk totals in 69 and 70 are kind of astonishing here. In just 202 plate appearances, 41 walks, and the following year, 38 walks. This led to an on-base percentage 164 points higher than his batting average here. And the year later, not quite as much, but it's 147 points above his batting average. If he could have thrown some more power in there, a couple more home runs giving him power, he probably would have played even more. But this high on-base percentage disparity is why he became an Oakland A. In a platoon role, also had a -1 arm, while tennis, his arm was +2. In 1971, he comes back and tries that same thing again, but it's only in 49 plate appearances at age 29. So he might have run out of gas finally in 71. Let's see if he's a Senator by looking at the roster sheet from 1971 as a catcher. For the Senators, they had moved on to Dick Billings and Paul Casanova. And the extra Washington Senators, he is not listed. So unfortunately, we have to retire Jim French, but my goodness, he got a lot of use in his short little career, and he got to experience being part of that dynasty Oakland A team for a short spell. Did make a lot of errors in that World Series because he was an E12 catcher, and it was very unlucky. But a fun time. It was fun using that guy's card. Next player, Von Joshua, who is kind of up and down in the whole decade with a couple different teams here. He appears, he disappears. He disappears and has no 72. He disappears again in 78. He's a Giant, he's a Dodger, Milwaukee Brewer, and a Padre. So he's all over the place. Obviously, he's not attached to being an Oakland A. They picked him up as a left-handed hitting guy who had the ability to play center field to give Angel Mangual a break in center, as Mangual struggled a bit against right-handed pitchers, the tough ones. So this 70 card was used, and there's 3 triples on it. He had an automatic triple on 1/6. He cannot go on waivers because he doesn't have a card for the year of 71. He also doesn't have a card for 72. His cards up will be 73 and 74 if you want to keep him. I just don't think it's worth keeping him. Not this Oakland team. So we have to retire Joshua, even though we know he will come out of retirement in future years. Next player, Gene Tenace. And the 1970 year of a short sample size, Oakland took full advantage of that. Hard to believe he'll get worse. But yeah, this small little sample size here, 305, 430, 562, 992, they ran that card in 4 times. Probably had, with all the postseason experience, 1,000 at-bats with that tennis card. Oh, maybe not 1,000, maybe 500 or 600 at-bats with that card. And yeah, would have had a MVP performance with it. 71 to 74. Interesting, he does not get any MVP votes, nor an All-Star Game appearance. Not until 75, when the A's are past their dynasty. Interesting. Leads the league in walks in 74, but you have the choices of 71, 2, 3, and 4 to use. 71, the batting average is the highest. Slugging's the highest in 73. Again, all off season to figure out which Gene Tenace you want to use. Find out if he can play a little bit of first base would be nice. Gene Tenace is a keeper. We have 3 and 3. Next up, we go to 2 pitchers, and neither had an association with the Oakland A's. The first is Cal Kuntz. He was a part of the big trade between Milwaukee, Oakland, and Boston that got Mike Hegan here, and Mike Torres was moved, and George Scott was moved, and Marty Patton was moved, and Cal Kuntz ended up going as a Cub to a Red Sox, a Met, and then a Red Sox in 70 and 71. In 71, only 21 innings. I'm assuming that card's not being printed. We can take a peek by looking for Boston's roster page and confirming the loss of Cal Kuntz. He's not there. Look at their extra pitchers. He's not there, so we can retire him. Now Oakland's in a situation where they're going to have to get on the phone and make some deals. This is what I talked about trading Stan Swanson and trading Ron Taylor. They're going to have to start getting guys, sending some guys away because you have too many retirements here. You have 4 guys who do not participate in baseball anymore. Donaldson, French, Joshua, and Kuntz. So you're going to have vacant spots on your roster, empty spots, and you need to fill those with somebody. The way to do that is to trade an active player for a guy you can keep or put on waivers and get out of the retirement pool. And the last pitcher is Rick Austin, who was a Cleveland Indian. I would have bet a lot of money that Rick Austin would not have had any World Series participation and certainly not factored into decisions. He actually won and lost World Series games here for Oakland in his participation, which is stunning. So here it is, a little career, 70. This was the Cleveland card we brought in, and why? Well, he threw left-handed. You throw left-handed, you're going to find a spot in the league. And even though his ERA is .479 and a 1.47 WHIP, you get into this league, and the big gamble the A's had was, you know, as one of the worst left-handed relievers around, they're willing to deal with that because they were such an incredible team otherwise, and they had Bob Locker and Raleigh Fingers in the bullpen anyway. So the point was to not have Austin lose games for him, and really, even in the World Series, he got a World Series win and really wasn't responsible for the loss. His World Series loss was the defensive lapses of Campaneris that caused that to happen. So, can we get this guy on waivers in 1971 with 23 innings on the Indians? You have to go see if his card exists. The only way he goes on waivers is Strat-O-Matic prints the card. If they don't print it, I don't print it myself. Or I do print extra cards, of course, when I do individual season drafts, but I don't play the cards. I just use it for drafting purposes and moving talent around the league for drafting, but not actually playing games of Strat-O-Matic with. I don't like to use the nameless cards. He does not exist in the year of 71 either. So Oakland has got some work to do in the off season. In other words, they got to move retired players and trade them to teams who have an abundance of keeper and waiver guys and who need retired players. So they might end up losing some draft tokens in that process. They have 3 guys we know they're keeping, which make a whole lot of sense. So that's the easy part. And they got to find a 4th Beatle. They got to find Ringo somewhere. They got Bando Campaneris and Gene Tennis joining the band. But they got to find another guy elsewhere who wants to come back. Perhaps it's Blue Moon Odom, who's with Las Vegas. Perhaps it's Paul Lindblad, who's in Texas. Or perhaps it's Jim Rowland, who's on Las Vegas. That makes a ton of sense, particularly Lindblad, who had a bad year with the Rangers. I'm just going to pencil that in. They need to find a left-handed reliever they can count on to take the vacated Rick Austin spot in their Oakland bullpen. And that will help the Oakland A's finish games and not rely on complete games of Vita Blue and Catfish Hunter so much. So that's it for this fun eliminating the Oakland A's video. Thanks for checking this out. We'll see you next time.